and welcome to the Doomloop Dispatch, the new show that covers the worst parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm your host, Kevin L. Jones, and with me whenever possible is...
D. Scott Miller.
And today we have an institution, a truly massive figure in Bay Area politics and journalism. We have Tim Redmond, former executive editor of the Bay Guardian, and now the editor and columnist at 48 Hills, his blog that he's been running since 2013, and is truly one of the best sources for news and information here in the Bay Area, especially for San Francisco politics. If you really want to know what's going on, you gotta follow 48 Hills. So thank you so much, Tim, for coming on.
I'm so happy to be here. So happy to be on your show.
Awesome. So let's start it off. We've been following that in Joel Engardio recall, and what happened is what we expected. He is gone. Gone. There was one round of voting, and he was out. But so, who do you think is Lurie's going to replace him, Tim?
Well, he's got a big challenge on his hands. Right? Joel Engardio was recalled by 65% of the voters. That's an overwhelming statement. It's more than I think the recall organizers even expected. And really, there were a couple of issues in the recall. One of them, obviously, is the Great Highway. And whoever the mayor appoints, it's got to be someone who opposes closing the Great Highway, because that was obviously if he thumbs his nose at the voters and said, you threw this guy out because of the Great Highway, and now we're going to put someone in who's just like him, they're going to be really unhappy, right? But there's another issue that was a really important part of this recall, and that is the mayor's new zoning plan. He calls it the family zoning plan, but essentially what this does is it allows a lot more density on the west side of town. It's going to allow, 12-story skyscrapers along commercial strips like Geary and Clement and Taraval. And the voters on the west side, certainly in District 4, are not happy with this at all. They're not happy with the increased density. And some of that is, they like their single-family neighborhood. Right? Some of it is people are really worried about the destruction of small businesses in commercial corridors. Right? Because here's what happens. You allow 12-story buildings along, let's just say, Geary Boulevard, right, between Arguello and 20th, all right? There's a ton of small, locally owned independent businesses, right? Many of them Asian-owned businesses, and they're in 2-story buildings. So in order to build a 12-story building, you have to demolish what's there. Mm-hmm. And that means that business is gone because it's never coming back. Because even though the mayor talks about relocation, these are community businesses that are based in a place. And once they're gone, you get a 12-story building. It's all going to be luxury housing because that's the only thing that developers will pay for now. It's going to be rich people moving in. And that little Chinese restaurant, that hardware store, that nail salon, whatever it is, they're never going to be able to pay the rent in the new building. So they're gone. So we're talking about massive displacement. Then you got the problem that under State Senator Scott Wiener's new law, SB 79, developers are allowed to demolish 2-story rent-controlled buildings and put up 12-story luxury housing. So you're going to have these small rent-controlled buildings that are going to be demolished. Now, those tenants are gone because the new building will not be rent-controlled. And if it is rent-controlled, if the developers say, okay, we'll accept rent control. Okay, we'll accept rent control starting at $4,500 a month.
Yeah.
So now what happens? Okay, now the mayor needs 6 votes to get this plan through. Engardio was one of those 6 votes. If he puts someone in place who supports demolitions, taller buildings, destruction of small locally owned businesses on the west side, the voters are going to be really unhappy. And let us also remember that area is overwhelmingly, a majority of the voters, certainly who voted in the recall, are Chinese. Those are people who put Daniel Lurie in office. He won significantly with the Chinese vote. Those people are going to be really unhappy at him if he puts someone in office who defies them. And there's a lot of feeling on the west side of town, particularly among the Chinese voters, that Joel Engardio didn't listen to them, that he ran on a platform of saying, we're going to leave the Great Highway open during the week. He changed his mind, and they felt like it was imposed on them. So we've got some kind of unhappy voters on the west side of town, but they're Lurie voters, or they were Lurie voters. So he's got a real challenge now. Who is he going to put in? If he puts in someone who strongly supports his upzoning plan, that person may very well lose next June, right? And it's also, and then all of a sudden, like one of his bases of support, which is the West Side voters, are going to turn against him. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because he won when he won mayor, the issue that he won on was crime. We're going to make the city safe. We're going to crack down on crime. We're going to crack down on fentanyl. We're going to arrest everyone. We're going to arrest homeless people. We're going to lock people up. Crime, crime, crime. But right now on the west side of town, I think what we saw in the recall was the issue that's on top of the voters' minds isn't crime. It's housing and development. Right? And that's a battle that Lurie's going to have a hard time winning with his current approach. So he's got a real challenge on his hand, and I don't know what he's going to do.
Yes, great point.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say too, what you point out is so interesting and so against the narrative that the Yimbys and abundance people want to push. I mean, they want to say like, oh, you guys just don't want more housing, you know, like you guys are just NIMBYs, not in our backyard. But you're literally pointing out that the plans that they are pushing will remove people's livelihoods, will, you know, completely flip their world around and probably cause them to have to leave San Francisco, which, by the way, the Yimbys and people do not care about. They don't. They want new people. So I mean, do you see that more and more like that? I mean, that narrative, the NIMBYism, you know, that they point out. Oh, you're just all NIMBYs. I mean, do you really think that's a real thing? Do you really think?
Well, okay, there are some people. There are absolutely some people who want to see the sunset the way it is. They want to preserve single-family housing. They don't want any more density. They don't want. Now, part of that is parking and traffic, and that was a big issue with the Great Highway. Part of it is like, you know, if you put a lot more people on the west side, there's going to be a lot more cars because, frankly, we do not have the transit infrastructure on the west side of town to handle all of those new people. And when I asked the mayor about this, I said, what are you going to do if you put 30,000 more people in a neighborhood where Muni is already overcrowded and the lines aren't running fast enough? And by the way, Muni's going broke.
Yes.
What's the plan for that? And he said, well, basically what he said is, we'll worry about that later. That's what he basically told me. Well, you know, if we get our house in order and the city economy starts bouncing back, maybe there'll be money from Muni. All right. That was his basic thing. We'll deal with that down the road. But again, there are people who don't want to see more development in their neighborhood. But it's interesting because there's also a lot of folks, particularly the Race and Equity and All Planning Coalition and Progressive San Francisco, who are saying you're only building housing for rich people.
Right.
Yep.
This is not going to bring down prices. And look, I got no problem with density. If you, I live in Bernal Heights. You want to put taller buildings in Bernal Heights? That's fine with me. But it's not going to bring down housing prices.
Yeah.
Right? If you want to bring down housing prices, the National Bureau of Economic Research data shows, and lots of other data shows, you're going to bring down housing prices. You need to build non-market affordable housing. And also, the number one factor in a lack of affordability in housing is not supply. It's median income.
Yep.
Mhm.
Right. That's the reason. I have argued that economic inequality is what's driving the housing affordability crisis.
That's right.
We brought all these rich people into San Francisco and we don't tax them
Yep.
the way, I mean, you know, under those radical leftists, Eisenhower and Nixon, the marginal tax rate on very high income people was 80%.
Mhm.
And we had a middle class and we didn't have a lot of billionaires. When I was growing up, there were exactly 3 billionaires in the entire country. Now there's 50 in San Francisco.
In San Francisco alone.
In San Francisco alone. And when you do that, you drive up housing prices, right? So this whole idea that by building more housing for rich people, we're going to bring down housing prices, particularly when developers are saying, we're not going to build unless rents go up another 20% because
Right.
the profit isn't high enough. So, you know, if this worked, if this idea of just letting developers build all they want, high rises everywhere, let them build market rate housing, eventually prices will come down. If that were true, Vancouver, BC would be the most affordable city in North America.
Right.
Because that's exactly what they did for the last
Yep.
25 years.
Mhm.
It is the least affordable city in North America.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think we have plenty of data that says that approach isn't going to work. It isn't going to bring down housing prices. It'll do a lot of things. But if the goal here, and the Yimby say this is the goal, if the goal is to bring down housing prices, I think the data shows that building more market rate housing doesn't work.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
my thing is though, is where are they doing this projection where there are all these rich people who want to move into these buildings?
Well, that's
Like,
the other interesting
Yeah, I mean,
issue, of course.
how's that supposed to work?
Well, that's the other interesting issue, of course, is like, you know, if you actually build 30,000 more housing units for rich people on the west side of town, will they fill up?
Yes.
And the answer is we don't know. The reality is the population of San Francisco has not increased on that level really in the last 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, people are moving here to do AI, and there's going to be an AI boom, and people are going to move here. But at the same time, what COVID showed us is that lots of people work remote now, and they don't live in the city, and they work. And so I don't know. The fact is, a lot of this is just, it's out of nowhere. We don't actually know how many people are going to move to San Francisco. We don't know, how much housing will be needed to accommodate them. This is all guesswork. But what we do know from the data is that if the goal is lowering housing prices for everyone, this approach isn't going to work.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, totally. Especially too, it almost seems like too that the AI boom is already on the way down because of all the issues, like with the new Chat GPT. It sounds like there's still, like a lot to figure out, and also people are seeing now too, like, oh, this stuff isn't as great as we hoped. It's adding more work, or we're not happy with what's coming out. So it's so interesting that, again, yeah, it's all speculation. And what are you going to get? Like in Berkeley, we have the life sciences labs that they built in Aquatic Park, which were finished years ago and still said empty.
Yep.
And that was public space that they took away.
Now, and at the same time, look what's happening at Salesforce, which was a fairly significant employer and still is in San Francisco. They're laying people off.
Yeah.
And why? Because AI is taking those jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So at the same time, we may be getting an AI boom. We may not. Again, it's all speculative. But at the same time, AI is taking jobs from people who used to be coders and programmers and working in at places like Salesforce. Now, are those people going to stay in San Francisco? We don't know.
Not likely. Not likely.
These economic projections are just wild speculation at this point.
Yeah. Totally. And it's funny too, because these are supposed to be well-paying jobs and stuff. And I saw after the lockdown that houses were more in demand. People, when they were in the lockdown, realized they don't like the apartment living, especially if they had kids and stuff too. Yep. But it seems like, they're just here to force people. But what's so interesting though too is that you point out in a recent column that the fight over the Manhattanization of San Francisco has been going on since the 80s. And was Quentin Kopp one of these people that was kind of pushing this? I think I remember Jello Biafra talking about.
Yeah, this goes back actually to the 50s and 60s.
Oh. And
it actually goes back to the immediate post-war era when, I'll try to make this long story short. During World War II, of course, the federal government, there was a war powers board that was set up that basically seized control of everything: industry, business, the war effort, the military, and the generals and the politicians worked together to basically turn the U.S. into a wartime economy, and that involved a lot of centralized planning, right? And that's what happened in the Bay Area. They said, okay, the people we're going to, first of all, the Japanese people in Japantown, we're moving them to concentration camps. We are sending trains into the deep south to try to get black people to move to San Francisco to work in the shipyard. They're going to live here. They're going to work here. And then, and it worked in the sense that we won the war. But after the war, these planners didn't want to stop. Mm-hmm. And they realized, they thought, okay, let's look at the San Francisco of the future in the post-war era. And let's look at, why are people in Manhattan so rich? Why is real estate so valuable in Manhattan? Well, it's because of European trade, right? What's going to be a bigger market, Europe or the Pacific Rim, right? So let's organize the Bay Area. And they actually created a group called the Bay Area Council that still is around. And there were various other committees but they literally sat around in Ben Swig's suite at the top of the Fairmont Hotel, which he used to own. And they took a map of San Francisco and they looked at it and they said, okay, downtown San Francisco is going to be a high-rise office center for finance, insurance, real estate, and trade with the Pacific Rim. All right. The worker bees are going to live in the East Bay and Contra Costa County. We're going to build BART to funnel them all into downtown, which is why BART only works to funnel people from the suburbs into downtown. Mm-hmm. Right? And what we're going to do is we're going to build as dense and as tall as we can, because when you do that, the land becomes more valuable.
Yep.
And no one ever held a public hearing and said, let's turn San Francisco into Manhattan West. It just happened in secret. This is why for example, they said a world-class city like Manhattan needs a convention center. So let's demolish 10,000 units of affordable single-room occupancy housing south of Market, and let's turn that into a convention center, right? Let's redevelop the Western Addition by driving all of the black people out, right? This was all planned, but it wasn't. The public didn't know about it. So it wasn't until the 60s, the early 70s that people started looking around and saying, wait a minute, this city is changing dramatically and no one asked me.
Right.
And that's when the what we call Manhattanization movement really started on many, many fronts. But the thing to remember is it wasn't about stopping housing. And the Yimbys say, oh, you people have always wanted to stop housing. That's actually not true. In fact, in the 80s, and I was here, in the 80s, we argued that if you're going to build offices and put more people in here, you need to build housing for them. We had something called the Office Housing Production Program, which would require office developers to build housing at the same time. Dianne Feinstein was mayor, and she hated it because the developers didn't like it, and she liked anything the developers liked. So that never really got off the ground in the way that it should have, because Dianne Feinstein's attitude was, the more development we have downtown, the more money comes into the city. Well, what actually happens is the more the price of land goes up, which is why we started to see displacement and gentrification following this in the 80s and into the 90s. So this actually has a long, long history, but it was never about stopping housing. It was about stopping office creep into the neighborhoods, right? About stopping projects that would drive up the price of land so high that only rich people could afford to live here. Right? And that's why we called it the Manhattanization of San Francisco, because obviously in Manhattan, it's the densest urban area in the United States. And the land is incredibly valuable, and therefore prices are incredibly high. So that was the roots of this whole battle, and it's still going on today.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So crazy how it continues on, especially, yeah. I keep hearing over and over again too, like, you had your chance and now we have this issue. But I also remember too, a lot of the homeless issues being started after the Twitter tax break, because people came in just buying buildings left and right and kicking people out. And I would say that was more of an issue more of a reason we have a homeless crisis than anything else.
Well, interesting. I moved to San Francisco in 1981, and there were not a lot of homeless people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you'd always get, and I volunteered at a community information center called the Haight-Ashbury Switchboard. And you'd always get some guy, and they were always young guys, who would hitchhike into San Francisco and come to the switchboard and think it was still the 60s, and the diggers were still here, and we're going to find them a crash pad. And they realized very quickly that the summer of love ended a long, long time ago. It's not the 60s anymore. And either they would stay, find a job, get a place to live, sleep in the park a couple nights and go home. But we didn't have long-term homelessness, right? That started with Ronald Reagan, and with tax cuts for the rich, and with an end to the social safety net. I mean, back in the day, you could get $350 a month plus food stamps if you were an indigent adult. Welfare, $350 a month cash plus $100 food stamps. A room in a residential hotel was $20 a week, $30 a week. You got enough money through welfare, SSI, whatever, to live in San Francisco and to not be on the streets. So then, of course, due to all of this speculation and tech booms and everything else, the price of even SRO housing went way, way up. SROs were converted to tourist hotels, despite efforts to stop it. And the social safety net collapsed. And that's when we started to see long-term homelessness. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really is a result of economic inequality. And it's not a result of San Francisco not building enough housing because, and by the way, let me stop for a second here. Every time somebody says, and I fall to it myself, San Francisco needs to build more housing. It's like, no, San Francisco doesn't build any housing. I wish we did. I wish the city built more public housing. We know how to build public housing now. It was a problem in the 60s. We know how to do it now. I wish the city did build housing. Mm-hmm. Developers build housing.
That's right.
Developers build housing. The city doesn't build housing. And developers build housing. Well, nonprofit developers build housing for affordability, but private market rate developers build housing for one reason, and it has nothing to do with housing. Profit.
That's right.
All they care about is return on investment. And it's also, it's not like the days of, It's a Wonderful Life, Jimmy Stewart, where you go to the local savings and loan and borrow the money to build a house. No, this money is coming from international speculative capital. It's coming from hedge funds. It's coming from pension funds. It's coming from insurance companies. And international speculative capital goes one place, where the return is highest. Mm-hmm. And for many, many years, the highest return was office buildings. Then the highest return started becoming luxury condos in San Francisco, Manhattan, LA, and Vancouver, BC. Mm-hmm. And that's where the return was high. So that's what got built, right? Now, none of that returns high. So that money's going someplace else. It's going into, AI stocks. It's going into wherever, right? But it's not going into building anything because the return on investment isn't high enough. Yeah. And the developers are saying, when rents go up another 20% in San Francisco, not that they're not high enough, when rents go up another 20%, maybe the return on investment will be high enough that we'll start building some more luxury housing. That's just how that's the reality of how the housing market works and how, modern late stage capitalism works. It's all about return on investment for speculative capital.
My question also is that why isn't public housing even a part of the discussion? Like there used to be a time when public housing was actually a thing. I mean, like now it's just this kind of like footnote or margin thing. Like, why did that happen? What was the flip?
The federal government stopped funding it.
Just period.
When Ronald Reagan basically decimated the federal funding for urban housing, it never came back. Basically, the federal money that paid for public housing, affordable housing in urban areas, right, died under Reagan. It didn't come back under Clinton. It didn't come back under Obama. It didn't come back under Biden. Right. The whole idea of rejuvenating and helping urban areas kind of died as the Democratic Party became the party of the suburbs. Mm-hmm. Right? And the Republican Party became the party of don't give any money in any way that might possibly help, for example, Black people. Yeah. I mean, that was Reagan's whole thing. Reagan's presidential campaign, and again, I'm very old. I was there then. Reagan's presidential campaign was fundamentally racist. I mean, he basically said, let's stop taking white people's money and give it to programs that help Black people. Mm-hmm. And, he talked about the welfare queens and their Cadillacs. You may have heard, right? Well, that was a not even very subtle racist dig. Yep. Right. And so that's why we don't have public, housing is expensive and building housing is expensive. The state of California puts up some money, nowhere near as much as they should. But a lot of this was funded for many years by federal money. And when that got cut off, and now, God help us, we're not going to get a penny out of Trump, it becomes very difficult to do. Now, let me set that aside for a second. There is a way to do this. Right? Many of us may have had issues with the Internal Revenue Service, but one of the things the IRS is very good at is data. Mm-hmm. Right? And they have a data shop, and they have people there who help researchers use their data. And I called the IRS a few weeks ago, and I got a data nerd like me on the phone, and we walked through the data on tax returns in San Francisco. And we looked at tax returns by quintile and by how much money people are making. And I was able to conclude from looking at IRS data that if we just taxed the richest 5,000 people in San Francisco out of a city of 800,000, if we taxed the 5,000 highest income earners just at the rate that they're saving from the Trump tax cuts, right, we would have an additional $700 million a year. Plenty of funding for muni, funding for affordable housing, all of this. And that's not even going back to, as I say, those days of radicals like Eisenhower and Nixon, where we actually had a real tax rate. I'm talking about just going back to where we were before the Trump tax cuts on the rich. Right? So actually, there's plenty of money there if we look for ways to recapture. And, there's all of these people who say, well, if you tax the rich, they'll move out of the city, they'll move out of California. Actually, we have lots of data on that. It's not true.
It's not true.
It's not true. Because we're talking about such a small amount of money to these people. So there's, it's not like we could build public housing. And again, the city and the nonprofits in the nonprofit affordable housing infrastructure in San Francisco is very solid and exceptionally competent. I mean, the nonprofits in San Francisco know how to build affordable housing. Mm-hmm. They know how to build public housing. The city now knows, and cities around it now knows how to manage public. The city mismanaged public housing for decades. It was terrible, right? It was also isolated. It was public housing that was only for poor people. And in other cities, in Vienna, for example, where vast numbers of people live in what is public housing, it's called social housing. That's social housing where people of all income levels live.
Mhm.
It's a thing, right? It's like that's where you live. In Stockholm, in Vienna, you live in, and rents are typically around 10% of your income
Yes.
or less, right? So there is no structural economic management reason why San Francisco can't do that. We absolutely could do that. It's just about where's the money. And obviously this was all built in Vienna in the days when, in the 20s and 30s, when they referred to it as Red Vienna, when socialists were in charge in the city. And now everybody looks back and says, wow, look at Vienna. Look at how low cost the housing is and how happy people are with the social housing in Vienna. Well, that's because the socialists built it.
Yep.
And say, oh my God, socialism. Oh my God, socialism. Right? The fact is, the only reason we're not doing that is political. And the political reason is we're not taxing the rich to bring in the money to do it.
Yes. And what they don't understand too, because they keep talking about, we want San Francisco to be Amsterdam,
Right.
where you can bike everywhere and stuff like that. And it's like, what's missing is that, but this works because of social housing, because
Right.
too, people can't rent forever. You can't rent you need a place for people to retire. And
Right.
that's what the social housing provides as well,
Well,
and that's
you can
probably
rent forever. You can rent forever if the rent's 10% of your income.
exactly.
And then you can save money to retire. Right. There's this idea that the only way that you can build wealth in America is through buying a house. And that is because we have set it up that way.
Yep.
Right. Because if rent is 30% of your income, which is what the federal guidelines are, and most people in San Francisco are paying more than 30% of their income for rent. And then you've got food and transportation and education. It's hard to set aside money to retire. If rent is 10% of your income, you got 90% to play with. That means that you could take that 20%, the difference between 10 and 30, and put that into a retirement fund, right? Put that away for your kids. Put it away for your kids. All the things that buying a house is supposed to do. You don't have to do that. There's other ways to do this. Right? And other countries have figured this out, just as, other countries have figured out somehow, 31 of the 32 modern industrialized societies have figured out how to do national health care.
Yeah.
There's only one that hasn't.
Yeah. I know. We literally pay for another country to have it, even.
So, as I say, the problem here is political. It's political will to tax the wealthy. The thing is, the United States economy has more than doubled in size in the last 25 years. The economists will tell you there's only one way a society gets rich, and that's productivity, increased productivity. There's been massive increases in productivity. The digital revolution has massively increased productivity, but all of the wealth created by that increased productivity has gone to the top 10% and most of the top 1%.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's our fundamental problem. I mean, during the post-war era, the kind of social compact that had a lot to do with 35% of the workplace being unionized, of the workers in the United States were in a union, and we had high marginal taxes. The social compact was some of the wealth that is built by the growth of the economy, and the economy grew rapidly during the post-war era, right? But a fair share of that wealth went to the workers, right? And a lot of it was because, as I say, the major manufacturers that were creating a lot of this wealth were all unionized. And the unions made sure that some of the wealth that was created went to the workers. And of course, the wealth at the very top was heavily taxed. And that money went to public services and to build roads and to build highways and to build. The University of California was a free system. Let's not forget, the University of California for many years was free. You could go to college. You could go to one of the premier public educational institutions in the world. And the University of California at Berkeley was, and to a certain extent, you could go there free. Right? Because we were taking this money that now accrues entirely to the top 1%, and we were putting it back into society. Now, I'm not saying that the post-war era was, that was also a period of racial redlining when Black people weren't allowed to buy property. And there were all kinds of horrible problems with the post-war era. Right? But if you just look at the way the economy worked and the difference between the way the economy worked then and the way the economy works now, it's pretty dramatic.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, especially it's just it's all speculation now. It's everything. It's so sad. It's what this is truly, and I was just talking about this with Ben Griff of Evolve California. Like, real estate to me is pretty much one of the most damaging industries in California. It really is holding everything back from, protecting Prop 13 for commercial buildings to wanting to remove all the rent controls. But let's get into something that's actually happening now and that you've been covering a lot. The family zoning plan that Daniel Lurie is pushing, Mayor Lurie is pushing. It's interesting because you had a great column about how the planning commission seems pretty much compromised. Do you now, with the family zoning plan, you're getting a lot of resistance, you're getting a lot of protests. Do you think because, though, that it seems like the city government is so in the pocket of real estate, do you think they're just going to slam it through anyways?
Well, this is going to be the interesting question, okay? Because the real estate and big tech, and that's really where a lot of the money comes from in San Francisco. It's real estate and big tech. In Sacramento, it's real estate and telecommunications. But in San Francisco, it's real estate and big tech. Right? That money, they spent $10 million or more in the last electoral cycle to elect what they call moderates, which I call economic conservatives to the Board of Supervisors and the Democratic Party, and they kind of tried to take over the city. Right? Those folks now are in charge on the Board of Supervisors. It is a conservative majority in the Board of Supervisors right now. Okay. Daniel Lurie needs 6 votes. The Planning Commission, we knew. The Planning Commission is made up of 7 people. 4 are appointed by the mayor and 3 are appointed by the Board of Supervisors. The 3 planning commissioners appointed by a more progressive Board of Supervisors all voted against the Lurie family zoning plan. And they voted against it because they said it doesn't make sense. It's not really a plan. It's just let developers do whatever they want. But the mayor's 4 appointees voted in favor. So 4-3, it gets moved to the Board of Supervisors. Now the question is, Joel Engardio got recalled in part over this. Right? What about Bilal Mahmoud? What about Myrna Melgar? What about Matt Dorsey? What about some of the more conservative supervisors? Well, not Dorsey as much because his district won't be affected. But Haight Street is affected by this. Right? Bilal Mahmoud, the center of his district is Haight Street. Right? Haight Street could lose half of its businesses. If they, because I mean, look, I'm sure all of you and many of the listeners have walked down Haight Street. That's mostly 2- and 3-story buildings with commercial on the ground floor. You demolish those buildings, and that commercial, those small businesses are gone. Right? So, will Bilal Mahmoud vote against the interests of his own constituents and small businesses to do this because the mayor tells him to and the real estate people tell him to? And if he does, is he going to survive? Right? What about Myrna Melgar, who represents a somewhat West Side district and a more conservative district? Those folks, some for selfish reasons, we want our nice suburban single family neighborhood, but some of them because they don't like this idea of seeing small businesses displaced and seeing renters displaced. There's the potential for an unusual coalition here between the Race and Equity and All Planning Coalition people, the progressives on the left, and on the east side of town, and the otherwise more conservative people on the west side of town who voted for Daniel Lurie, who voted for Joel Engardio, right? And who are now coming around and saying, wait a minute, that's not what we thought we were getting. There's a lot of buyer's remorse out there. And a lot of these folks who voted for the billionaire-backed slate are starting to say, wait a minute, they're not talking to us. What they're doing is stuff that we don't want. And so I don't, will this go through the Board of Supervisors? It might. It's not going to be 11-0. There's the opposition to it. And is there enough opposition? And if they say the West Side supervisors who were elected with the billionaire money, and the hate, not the West Side, District 5, that's going to affect District 5, Bilal Mahmoud, who beat Dean Preston with billionaire money. Right? Are the people in D5, when they start seeing the bulldozers arrive on Haight Street, are they going to be unhappy with Bilal? And now here's the next question. It makes this interesting. A lot of this is happening because of Scott Wiener. State Senator Scott Wiener passed all of the state legislation that says San Francisco has to add 80,000 new housing units in the next 8 years. Right? Or we're going to cut off all of your money, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. You have to allow for all this new housing. Well, Scott Wiener wants to be in Congress.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Sure
And he's
does.
got to run for Congress and attract some of these same voters, right, who are not going to be happy about the results of his legislation. So right now, since nobody covers Sacramento and the news media basically don't pay any attention to Sacramento anymore, Scott Wiener's been getting away with, as they do, as you know, what has Matt Haney been doing in his time in Sacramento? Nobody knows. Right? Nobody knows what he's been doing, right? So Scott Wiener has kind of gotten a pass because people are going to be mad at the mayor. They're going to be they're mad at Supervisor Engardio because he would have voted. He was all in favor of the upzoning plan. Mm-hmm. At a certain point, though, they might start to realize that the guy who wants to be our next member of Congress is the one who's behind all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then what happened? Now, I don't know who's going to run against Scott Wiener for Congress. I sincerely doubt he's going to run unopposed. Mm-hmm. But once people start pointing out, you don't like the bulldozers coming into the Sunset and the Richmond, that's the guy who did that.
Yep.
Maybe that'll make a difference. I don't know. I mean, he's going to have to answer for this too, because as I say, I really think that the Great Highway was the tip of the iceberg.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, people who are mad about the Great Highway are also going to be really mad about Mayor Lurie's zoning plan.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, Wiener, truly responsible for two of the worst Senate bills that are going through right now. SB 71, which is the anti-Semitism bill, which that's going to have some impact. And then on top of that, SB 79, which is basically one of these zoning bills where it's basically they just want to be able to put skyscrapers anywhere and just say, but it's near transit, you know.
And by the way, the vast majority of San Francisco qualifies for being transit-oriented development.
Yep.
Because this isn't just like a couple of areas. This is almost, if you actually draw the circles and draw the map, almost all of San Francisco would be affected by SB 79. And it allows for the demolition of up to 2 stories, 2 units of rent-controlled housing. And it basically allows developers to build up to 12-story buildings, but which, of course, in many cases in San Francisco means demolishing what's there now. Right. There's just not enough open space. You know, that when the mayor got asked about this at the board, and he said, well, most new housing gets built on empty lots. Well, yeah, but there aren't that many of them left. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to demolish. And San Francisco is so built out that to build something new, you have to demolish what's there now.
Yep.
So, and then we've got the problem that we're supposed to be building transit-oriented development, which means you build a 12-story building with very little parking so that the people there will take the bus. The problem is rich people don't take the bus.
Nope.
Right? So if you don't build parking, how are the rich people going to get around? On Waymos.
Yep.
Right? And how are they going to get all of their stuff that they order? Through deliveries.
That's right.
The traffic impacts of I got into this with the planning department at one point when they're talking about one of the tall buildings for rich people on like Oak and Van Ness in that area. And I asked one of the planners, okay, have you looked at the impacts just of the deliveries and the Ubers and Waymos that people are going to take? And they said, well, we don't have any way to predict that. It's like, well, it's actually not that hard. Why don't you sit there for 2 hours and watch all the delivery vehicles?
Yeah.
Watch all the DoorDash, watch all of the Amazon trucks. Because again, these are very wealthy people. They order a lot of stuff to be delivered. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to take the bus. They're going to call a Waymo.
Yep.
That's a techie grift. I mean, what you're saying is attached to all of this, on top of all the lunacy that actually is coming from the developers, the back end is a techie grift. It's just a techie. That's what it is. It's a grift.
Yeah, helping out the shareholders.
Yeah, because they know that they're going to take the Waymos. They know they're going to call the DoorDashes. They know that they're going to be like. That's exactly what's going to happen. So it doesn't the transit issue doesn't even really matter to them. But the techies are going to be grifting off these people the entire time. That's ridiculous. That's crazy.
You know, it's interesting. When Uber went public, when they first sold shares on Wall Street, when you do that, you have to fill out a lot of forms, right? And you have to basically tell the Securities and Exchange Commission, here's our business plan. So people who are going to invest will know there actually is a business plan. Right? And there's something called the Form 10K that you have to file, and it's hundreds of pages long, and nobody reads it except institutional investors who are looking at putting a lot of. But I actually read the whole thing, and deep down on around page 168, it says, we have a plan to become profitable, because at that point, Uber was losing $2 billion a year. Here's our plan to become profitable. Ready? We're going to destroy public transit.
Yes.
We're going to destroy public transit, and by destroying public transit, we're going to force people to take Ubers everywhere, and that's how we're going to make money. This is something they actually said in a public document filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission. That is their business plan. Wow. And that is part of this whole thing. Transit-oriented development, besides, it would only work if we had the transit. And Muni's got a $300 million budget deficit. We're going to be cutting Muni lines and running Muni less frequently. Right?
Yes.
And how do you make that work with supposedly transit-oriented development? It just, it doesn't make sense.
Yes, and they're also expecting these new buildings to pay for BART as well. But yeah, this is the deal. This is what you even saw in New York City with the congestion pricing. Basically, who was paying for it? Big investors in Lyft and Uber. And guess what? The congestion pricing, guess who got exemptions? Rideshare companies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's so crazy.
That's a grift. That's a grift.
Yeah. I know. Well, it's that long con, right? Like kind of the Amazon thing too. Like, let's just hold on until we can kill it, Yeah. And that's the thing. But that's the thing though, too. You in your column about the fight against Manhattanization, you talked about that, how because the battle actually kept away the office spaces, and so the city didn't rack up all this debt to build them, that actually probably came out of those 80s pretty well. Now, could we be setting ourselves up for more issues, especially if we're not investing in transit?
Absolutely. I mean, San Francisco in the 90s basically decided that our future is tech offices, and City Hall decided the future of San Francisco's economy is tech offices. So they allowed tech offices to basically destroy the blue collar, what we call production, distribution, and repair, PDR sector in the South of Market. Right? When I moved to San Francisco, the South of Market area had a lot of blue collar jobs. We had a thriving printing industry, for example. Right? All of that went away because office space was considered more valuable. All right. Now, people are working from home. Office space is vacant.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't. And now what are we doing? Oh my God! Well, we're going to try to. Mayor Lurie is trying to force people back into the office. Long term, that's probably not going to work, right? Long term, this idea of investing, farmers will tell you, you never plant a monocrop. You never plant only one type of crop. Smart farmers, sustainable farmers will say, because if there's some pest eats the corn, you still got the soybeans. Right. And you rotate your crops and you don't. But what we've done in San Francisco is invested in a monocrop economy: downtown, finance, insurance, real estate, and tech. And now that has collapsed, the city's economy, downtown is dead. Well, yeah, you basically put all of your money into one area and one gamble that this would last forever, and it didn't. And now you don't have as much to fall back on.
Yes. Yeah. So again, we're probably going to see San Francisco turn into Vancouver, a bunch of skyscrapers that are pretty much empty.
We might. I mean, again, we don't have to do this. I mean, you got all that empty office space downtown. We could, for example, the city could. I saw a 20-story building in San Francisco just sold for like $2.5 million. I'm like, almost nothing, because it was taken over by the bank and they had to unload it. And I actually called some of the supervisors I knew at the time. It's like, why won't the city buy this? Buy it. It's nothing. Buy it. Well, what are we going to do with it? Well, here's what you do. You turn it into artist space. Right? What you do is you say you tell artists all over the country, come to San Francisco and we're giving you a virtually free studio space. What do artists need? Artists need cheap space. Right? Studio space for visual artists, but recording space for performance artists, and rehearsal space. Right? Well, how expensive is it, particularly since, in the 80s, when there were vacant warehouses in South of Market, a lot of artists moved in and they fixed them up.
Yes. And the residents. Right? The residents famously owned a warehouse space that artists would use and buy up. Yeah.
They fixed them up. Okay. Now, there were problems with that. Ghost ship. All right. Yeah. A lot of these places were not up to code and they were fire traps. But the new buildings that are empty, they got sprinklers. Yeah. They got modern electricity. It's all built to code. Right. There's no reason why we couldn't think creatively. And guess what? Artists go out for coffee. Artists go out for dinner. Right. That could help revitalize downtown. But the speculators aren't going to make any money.
Yeah.
Right? The real estate speculators who bought these buildings are going to have to take a bath. And
Right.
some of them are going to anyway. So why doesn't the city look at creative ways to bring people back into downtown, that don't involve a lot of speculation, where the goal here is not speculative profit?
Yes, especially too. All these guys are reading Richard Florida. How do you make your cities cool and attract more residents? Well, support the artist. I mean,
Well,
that's what made San Francisco cool in the first place.
And that's the other thing, though, because what a lot of people seem to be overlooking is that the right now calls everything they do culture wars.
Mhm.
Everything they do is a culture war right now. But the real culture is the stuff that comes from artists, not from influencers, not from pundits, but from honest to God people who create culture. Like a good counter attack to the astroturfed concept of culture war would be to actually support culture and the people who actually create culture. That would be a great way to counteract that.
I mean, think about all of the incredible music that has come out of San Francisco over the last half century. Think about all of the musicians who got their start here, and the Bay Area, San Francisco, and Oakland. I mean, think of all of the internationally important hip hop rap music that came out of Oakland.
Yeah.
Why? Because space was cheap.
Yeah.
Right. And because rehearsal space was cheap, and because you could get your band together here, and people could, and rent was cheap enough that you could afford to, when musicians start off, they don't start off like Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Most musicians start off needing cheap space. They need cheap rent. That it takes a while to build up, right? But why? That's not happening now, right? We are not seeing that wave of incredible creativity coming out of San Francisco because it's too expensive.
Yep.
Yes, it's true. I mean, seriously, the Summer of Love happened because the Haight-Ashbury was abandoned and it was cheap rent.
That's right.
And and that's what attracted all these great artists. And truly, San Francisco became the center of culture, especially American culture.
Right.
And from that, so crazy. Yeah. But, sacrifice profits. What?
But that's the other thing, though. Is when I first came to San Francisco, it really still did have very much a culture in downtown, and especially if you go down to Market Street. I used to work at the Virgin Megastore, right? Like that gigantic Virgin Megastore. But it still very much felt like a place where tourists wanted to come. I haven't seen that in a long time. I don't see this kind of culture that actually attracts tourists anymore. I mean, you come to ride the cable car and walk down an empty Market Street with no cars on it. I mean, it's like they gave it up. It's like they totally gave up on incentivizing people to travel to San Francisco and to take in the culture.
Yeah. And again, this is not rocket science. This is not we need some brilliant planetary. This is pretty simple. It's pretty simple. Address economic inequality. Take some of the great wealth that has been created in San Francisco and use it to make this city a more affordable, vibrant place for people who can build culture.
That's right.
San Francisco before the Twitter tax break. I mean, that's all I want. I miss that stuff.
Easy peasy.
Yeah, well, so I want to get in because you've been doing this for a while. You've been a reporter for over 30 years. I want to talk about San Francisco legacy media. Yeah. Now, you were at an alt weekly for years, probably one of the most influential ones, the Bay Guardian.
You were my boss.
in a manner of speaking.
Yeah.
In a manner of speaking.
But so now we're seeing the legacy media totally turn on, what we consider journalistic values and ethics. I mean, supporting columnists like Heather Knight, who, I mean, truly, is untrustworthy. But they're still giving them space. Now, you being in the alternative weekly world, is this almost like, oh, you knew what was happening and now everyone else can see it? I mean, how do you feel about the current media environment?
Well, it's really difficult. Right? When I started at the Bay Guardian, it was us, kind of the scrappy underground publication, up against the Examiner and Chronicle, which were very, very successful. Right, bringing in the Examiner and Chronicle together used to bring in at least $350 million a year just from what we call classified advertising.
Oh wow!
Right? and which of course now is all on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace and other places like that. And nowadays, right, the alternative press model, which became very successful. At one point, we had 130 alt weeklies in the country. And at one point, The Guardian was running, 150 pages a week and 150,000 circulation. The model was we give you the news and the culture free, and we pay for it with ads. Mm-hmm. And we paid for it with display ads and with classified ads. Mm-hmm. And after Craigslist and then Google and Facebook had sucked up all of those ads, it became the business model didn't work anymore. Mm-hmm. Right? So that business model didn't work anymore. So, and now you've got the Chronicle kind of flailing around, mm-hmm. trying to survive on subscriptions, but smaller and smaller. Where at least the Chronicle hasn't yet been snapped up by Alden Capital, which just bought the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. Alden Capital is a vulture fund, basically. What they do is they buy newspapers in cities around the country, and they essentially suck all the lifeblood they can out of them, cut costs down to nothing, try to get rid of all the reporters, suck everything, and then let it go.
Right.
That's sad.
At least that hasn't happened in San Francisco yet. But, so we've got the Chronicle filling around. We got the SF Standard, which basically exists because billionaire Michael Moritz is funding it.
Yep. That's right.
The Standard has some good reporters. Friends of mine work there. There's some good reporters who work at the Standard. But I don't know if you were around long. D. Scott, you remember the Bay Citizen?
Yeah, I do.
The Bay Citizen was the same thing. It was the newspaper put up, and they hired some good reporters.
Yeah.
They also hired some conservative reporters, and with the Standard, some conservative columnists. But that existed because Warren Hellman, who was a billionaire, paid for it. And then Warren Hellman died.
Yep.
And his kids had no interest in it, so it just folded.
Yes, yeah, that's what happened.
Right. So the Standard has no sustainable business model except Michael Moritz's money. Mm-hmm. And that makes for kind of a shaky situation. Michael Moritz is also, of course, actively involved in local politics, which means, and I'm not denigrating some of the very good reporters at the Standard, but it does raise credibility issues around
totally.
What is this paper really about? And then, but the good news is then you've got a whole kind of new alt weekly style infrastructure coming. You've got 48 Hills, you've got Mission Local, you've got shows like this, right? Yeah. You've got Oakland Side and Berkeley Side, you've got Broadcast Stewart, right? We've got all of this stuff that's trying to find a different business model.
Yeah.
And our business model is a nonprofit. I mean, I never wanted to be a capitalist. I never wanted to run a for-profit business. And my goal here is that 48 Hills provides the material for free. We have no paywall. You can look at it. You don't have to, but we depend on people donating. It's kind of like KPFA. Right?
Yeah.
You want it to happen. You got to give money. So,
totally.
And there's other models that are emerging. There's a new group of former Chronicle people who've just started something called Coyote Media.
Yes, yeah, I've heard that. That sounds exciting.
Weekly.
Yeah.
And again, Salil Ho is involved in that. Salil Ho is an amazing writer and reporter. And I really wish them all well. I don't know what their business model is, but it's going to emerge because democracy can't survive without journalists, without reporters.
Yep.
And local democracy, San Francisco democracy cannot survive without local reporters. Mm-hmm. So new models are emerging. And, honestly, I don't know what's going to look like in 5 years. I really don't know what's going to look like in 5 years, but there are going to be some type of good journalism outlets that are happening. I teach journalism at the University of San Francisco, and I always tell my students, look, when I was in college, I never thought that these, flailing weekly newspapers would become a very successful business, and that I would end up working working at a alt weekly that suddenly was, huge and influential, and that exploded. That model exploded in the 80s. Right? Something else is going to happen. Media, and it's going to be partially, Doomloop Dispatch, and it's going to be partially 48 Hills, and it's going to be partially Broadcast Stewart, and it's going to be partially something else that you and I haven't thought of yet.
Yep.
Right. And I just hope that San Francisco remains marginally affordable enough, and the East Bay remains marginally, that these new, what will someday be successful, kind of underground startup journalism outlets can survive.
Right on.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, I would love for this to pay my bills. And
the thing is, when I started at the Bay Guardian, we were putting out like 24 to 28 pages a week. We had a circulation of 30,000, and we had 4 editorial employees. Like we had an editor, we had an arts editor, a person who answered the phone and did all the listings, and me. That was it. And I got hired at $200 a week, and I thought, God, wow, I've got a job. And I never imagined that in 10 years I was going to be managing a staff of 30 with a publication that was bringing in close to $10 million a year. Right? Who knows what's going to happen with Doomloop Dispatch in 5 years?
No. Something good.
Hopefully. Something good.
Totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I like that. I like that. I'm hoping there's hope in there.
Tim, you've always been good for that, man. I'm going to tell you, you've always been good for that. Even when I was at the Bay Garden, you always had a way to flip things around, make it seem like things aren't as hopeless as they sometimes feel.
You have to have hope. You have to believe that there's a better world out there. Otherwise, you get up in the morning. It's like, oh God, I'm not even going to bother. But what the Trumpites want, what the MAGA people want, they want to scare us into submission.
Right.
They want to make us think there is no hope. They want to make us think there's no way to fight back and that there's nothing we can do. And fighting that attitude is one of the most important things that we can do. Fighting that fear and that attitude and saying, I think it was Rebecca Solnit who posted recently on Facebook that the Nazis thought they were going to be in power for 2,000 years. They lasted 8.
That's right.
Right. So, this too will pass, and we have to be planning for a different world on the national level, on the international level, but also on the local level.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's where I have always put my effort for the 40 plus years I've been doing this, is on the local level. On what can we do here in San Francisco to try to make the city a better place for everyone?
Yes, because truly, it's a place you can be most effective if you don't have any money.
Exactly.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I think that's a great place to end it because that's so positive. Yeah. This has been great, Tim.
I came to get informed, and next thing you know, I'm inspired, man.
Totally. That's wonderful. So this was great. Tim, where can we follow you? I know we have the 48 Hills, and I'm definitely going to put the link in the show notes. But where else should we follow you?
You just, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. It's my little tiny rebellion. But
you'll show Musk.
Yeah, show Musk. I'm not going to call it X. But 48hills.org is you can go there. There's no paywall. You can also sign up for our newsletter. There you can get 48 Hills delivered in your inbox. We now have a special $50 a year. You get a special newsletter from me every Thursday. There's all kinds of different ways, and you can support us. You can go to 48hills.org/donate, and if you can give $5, $10, $15, $20 a month, that's what keeps us going. Of course. If there's somebody out there listening who's got $50,000 to give us, I'll take it.
Totally. We all got bills to pay. Seriously. And we're the same way, follow us on all the socials, but you could also throw $1 our way on our Patreon. That makes a huge difference for us too.
It makes things easier.
Yeah, exactly. This has been great, Tim. Thank you for all you do. Truly, some of the most insightful commentary on what's going on in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Really, people follow it, donate it if you can.
Read it as often as you can. It keeps you informed for real.
Exactly, especially if you care about the city. And basically, we'll see you next week. Until then,
keep fighting the good fight.